Thanks for everyone's patience. My name is Emmelyn, and this is my second APIdays event, and I'm very grateful to be here. My talk today is about how business and IT are critical API partners. I'll be sharing my experience of both building and consuming APIs. So I actually worked on a team where we built different kinds of APIs, but then I've also been in middle management for a Berkshire Hathaway company where we did global distribution. And so I'll share some of those experiences and hopefully give you something to take home that's very useful to you. I work for a company called Axway. Our headquarters is in Phoenix, Arizona. However, we have a long history because we're a spin-off of Supersteria in France. And so we're very excited to be here and a global sponsor of the APIdays conferences. I'm part of a team called Catalysts, and it's our take on what you traditionally might think of as a center of innovation or excellence, except we're globally distributed, and what we do is we work both internally and externally to accelerate this API journey, both as a company, with our customers, and with partners. So we actually partnered with Emmelyn Wang. They're an independent research firm, and they did a study, a questionnaire of IT and business leaders, basically asking them, what's important to you? And so at the end of the presentation, I have both a link and a QR code where you can read the entire report. And basically, I totally agree with the colleagues before me who mentioned that APIs aren't about integration, but also the stark reality in businesses and in IT departments today is we have to do them, right? And so how can we be successful? So if you get a chance to look at British Gas's digital transformation video from 2012, they actually show a beautiful video with no words, and I'm not going to show it, but you can look it up. But as you're watching that video, note that back in 2012, there were no digital assistants, right? It was kind of a new thing to have Alexa or the Google Assistants. And so they were envisioning something with the technology stack that they had that wasn't possible yet, that was delivering a seamless experience to customers. And the other interesting thing about that video is it also shows a fully monetized ecosystem. And in that video, you'll note that it's got IoT, security, and concepts that weren't available yet, but they had that vision. And so this presentation is all about arming you to go back to your company, to work with different business units and leaders to not lose sight of this vision that you're trying to build. The technical details are very important, architecture is important, but sometimes having an end-to-end vision of what you're trying to build helps you to better communicate between business and IT. And so I thought about my experience and my colleagues' experience. What does a healthy partnership look like? And as many of my colleagues mentioned before this, it is about communicating. Just like a healthy relationship that you have personally, professionally, you need to constantly communicate about those needs, desired outcomes, right, which is often different from actual outcomes, empathy. So I'm glad no one has really talked about empathy. So typically, enterprises might just throw an API over the wall and won't actually think downstream how it's going to affect the rest of the organization. And so having that empathy really helps both business and IT to collaborate together. And then I thought about how does the business view IT? So IT helps us to stay productive as a business, but it's also viewed as a cost center. So how do you balance that? And then the other piece that's really interesting is the fact that, and I'll go back to the Emmelyn Wang report, IT is overloaded, right? IT is exhausted. And so how can they empower everyone else in the organization to carry out this vision? So it's 86% of the people who responded mentioned that IT shouldn't just be integrating, but also enabling others. And that's very powerful. This is what people are dealing with in a very real setting. And then how does IT view business? So now that they're partnering together, IT needs business to give that intelligent context and to give requirements. and also to fund the IT operations, right? I mean, sales is very difficult, and that's the money that comes back to fund IT operations. And so when I was doing the global distribution, I saw how this happened, where I came up with a quality program, and when we implemented it and we were saving $1 million the first year, we could actually take that money and open new markets. So we opened offices in Tokyo and in Korea. And so this is another slide where, just like Eric was saying, you have to constantly evaluate and look at the attitude of the people involved in the program, and how, when you look at this, it should be easy. Like, you go to the airport and they say, "How are we doing?" and they've got a smiley face, and you press whether you like it or not. This is kind of where this is from, where you think about what are the attitudes of the organization today. And then this is sort of a map, and then I'll have a summary at the end, where I basically summarize the elements that really help you communicate an effective partnership, and I'll go through each one. So, yes, it's not about architecture. However, it's very useful, as many of you are CTOs and architects, to use the architecture to communicate to the business what you need. And so Mark Richards and Neil Ford, they have some great training on O'Reilly, and they talk about how it's always about managing trade-offs. And so as business and IT organizations, you work together, you have to manage these trade-offs, and I'll show why. So this, again, is Mark and Neil's diagram, where it's really important, right? Microservice architecture may not be the best architecture for what you're trying to do, but maybe it is. And so the reason why I love this diagram is on the very right, that's where the business cares about the cost. So space-based architecture, even though it's the fastest, it has the highest performance, it's got caching, so it's very, the performance is high, but look at the cost. It's very expensive. And you'll notice that microservices and event-driven are as well, but we need the modularity and the scalability and the reusability of those kind of architectures. And I'm part of Async API, which is an open source collaboration. It's a group, basically it's a sister spec to the OAS spec. It's about event-driven architecture. And so we're trying to create a spec that's like OAS spec so that you can better adopt that type of architecture. So basically, as an organization, you have to navigate all these constraints. And you can't take the best aspects of architecture and just combine it, right? You can't just say, oh, it's like a recipe, I'm just going to take the best parts. It's the cheapest, it's the fastest, it's the most modular. You can do it in a hybrid integration scenario, but because you can't do it on certain platforms, so for example, GraphQL is amazing, but many enterprise tools don't support GraphQL, right? And so we want it to, and we'll continue evolving it. But that's why you have to partner together to handle all the trade-offs. And then there are the human elements. So I'm hoping the sound will come on. Ian Tan talks about our experience when I was delivering APIdays.
So it's interesting that what we heard and saw during the APIdays, the team that movement, we spoke to them. There were a mixture of the financial industry folks and the fintech folks. And that kind of did never happen 5 years ago, right? So the banks treated the fintechs as you have seen through the years, but that the thought process had evolved from being a competitor to being a lens. So you speak to them, fintechs especially, and when they show you where their websites, the devices that they have, or the apps that they have, you will see very clearly that they are really collaborating with the banks or the financial industry folks.
So that particular talk or summary just mentions that it's a culture, right? How ready is your culture to embrace being able to do APIs? And so culture to me is not just going to an office. So when I'm out on the road, I work in my home office, and I'll go for a week and I haven't seen a human. So I'll go to the store just so I can see people, and I'm very happy to see everyone today. And the reason why I mention this is culture helps us to stay productive. So for example, at Axway, we have a hybrid culture where you can go in the office if you work in a city where there's an office, or you can work remotely. And so it keeps the satisfaction very high. Also, one of my clients, before I joined Axway, Deltec, is an ERP company. They have 2,500 people globally distributed worldwide. And their internal support is amazing. It's basically, I think a gentleman mentioned today, customer grade. It's customer grade support for employees, which makes them very happy. It removes friction. And then when you release that into the partner ecosystem and with customers, now you also have very happy customers. And so Deltec has won a lot of awards for their service. You also need to, today, right, there's not a lot of API talent. And so you have to develop and constantly incentivize not only your employees, but also people who, for example, are trying to adopt your platform. And then this is really fascinating. So you have core business APIs, ones that power your applications and your products, but then you also have customizations that you either manage for your clients or ones that your customers create or ones that third-party developers create. And this is really fascinating because within the organization, these two things are constantly competing against each other. And the one inefficiency that companies deal with, because they have to, is, so say you're 7-Eleven and you don't want, well, you're competing against Amazon. So you try to use other cloud services. And so you say, okay, I want to create everything language agnostic, platform agnostic, but then you end up creating possibly the same API multiple times just because you don't want it to be tied to something. And so the next concept is basically security, scale, and resiliency. So the next two slides are key slides for people who need to convince companies that they actually have APIs. So it's basically this iceberg model where the companies say, I'm sorry, we don't have any public-facing APIs. They power our internal application, our customers and vetted partners can use it, they're internal only. And we only expose a few to the world. And the funny thing about this is, data leaks, or I don't like the word leaky APIs, but data and many things get lost because people say we don't have public-facing APIs. So if your company has any kind of native mobile application, IoT device, or website, you actually do have public APIs. And so this is something that I have to show, for example, business users, that when I go into the browser, I can inspect the payload just by looking in the developer tools in a Chrome browser, any other browser, for example. So this particular graphic is from David McCandless, and he's well known for visualizing data. So you can see these are pretty big names. And the idea is you want to make sure to design your API with security in mind. Also, you want to design for resilience. And so I could do a talk just on this slide alone, and maybe I will, but in another conference or local meetup. To me, these are three ways that IT and business can collaborate when working on the API product or service. Performance reliability, again, that goes along with the architecture piece that we talked about earlier. And then the technical spec. So contract consistency, right? Very fundamental concept, that API is a contract between the provider and the consumer. And also having predictability of access. So there are several websites and conversations where developers are really frustrated, or companies are frustrated, because an API accidentally got shut down, or intentionally it was shut down and no one communicated. And then adoption drivers. So I've done several talks, and they're available publicly, to talk about user acquisition, developer experience, network effects, and patterns. And these are three different ways, and we can go deep down the rabbit hole of how you can drive adoption. And so in general, what I believe helps business users understand the landscape is the fact that the API connects all of these pieces. And even though the shapes are equal, they're actually not, right? So for example, you could have multiple platforms connected by APIs that then form an ecosystem. And basically, it's not all things equal. And then finally, a very mature platform is what helps you capture market share, meaning the digital portions and the human touch, where it's a delicate balance, you actually create an experience that is the most mature, and that's actually how you keep users on your platform. So I was trying to wrap my head around platforms and economy, and I was looking at Alibaba's economy. What business aren't they in? And since I've never lived in China, I've only been there for 3 days for KubeCon, I had to connect it back home to my experience in North America, and I thought, okay, well, and I mapped this out physically, so it's not very pretty, but oh, okay, well, Amazon's economy, it looks a lot like Alibaba's, but little do we think, so does 7-Eleven, right? So 7-Eleven, as I mentioned earlier, their headquarters, global headquarters, is actually in Dallas, Texas, where I live, but they're a Japanese company. And so that makes a really fascinating culture to try to build and maintain APIs and platforms. And one thing I'm very excited about, relating it now to Europe, is that Axway powers the connected car experience with BMW. And so I love the fact that every Uber I've taken is a beautiful BMW, because it's not like this at home. So to summarize, communication, empathy, and being able to work together, business IT and IT, you get buy-in on the strategy, which is different than the implementation. And then I've added details to the mapping of the partnership. So with API architecture, you're justifying decisions, both technical and business. You're managing cost. The human elements, it's an incentivized experience. The culture really supports productivity. Managing expectations from core business APIs and competing concerns. And then how to secure and make your API program, and not just program, it goes on up that picture I showed on up the landscape, and just making it very resilient to the business changes, and then adoption drivers. And here's the QR code for the report. I've also added the link here. And these slides will be on the Axway SlideShare, and I believe they'll be on APIdays as well. And so feel free to scan this. I'll be here through Friday, and if you'd like to have a conversation about any of these aspects, I also wanted to highlight my colleague Christoph's workshop at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you prefer a talk that's deeply more technical, he'll be mentioning streamlining API workflows. And he's been with Axway for a really long time. I believe it's 17 years. And so he can talk to you about the culture. And that's pretty rare for a tech company from an American standpoint, so that's very commendable. And then you can follow me on, and I hope you'll have conversations with me in the greater API community. Feel free to email me. Would love to collaborate with you on articles on the APIdays media space, or like any kind of vendor neutral sort of platform. And I hope I see you at the next set of events, and appreciate your time. So thank you.